Labour's current strategy towards Europe is a sort of juggling process. John Major probably would have been better at doing this, as it was in the family. John Major's parents were, I think, jugglers. And Keir Starmer, I think, would struggle to juggle. And under Keir Starmer, the Labour Party has now stated two red lines. I don't know how you have two red lines. You must feel very trapped. No rejoining the EU, no single market or customs. Actually, that's three red lines, isn't it? Anyway, instead, Labour aims to remove Britain's problems by easing trade through practical agreements such as the existing veterinary agreement to reduce checks on animals and plant projects. So it's going to inflate that and develop that. I don't think it's enough. And polling data from the BMG group says that 63% of Labour supporters would favour rejoining Europe. So why not do that? There is support for rejoining Europe, and that's likely to increase under the during the term of a Labour Parliament, and put pressure on Starmer to enhance the UK's existing relationship with Europe if Labour wins power, when Labour wins power. Labour's proposals include building on the easing of trade barriers established by the Windsor Framework for Northern Ireland. So Northern Ireland, that thing created by Chris Heaton Harris, the Windsor Framework, provides the framework for revisiting Brexit and for simplifying customs checks and potentially expand on these measures to reduce trade friction and possibly even the friction of tourism and travel. But EU officials have said that, you just be cautious, because any agreement that eases trade will necessitate adhering to current EU rules and the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. And this requirement would challenge Labour's red lines and create tension with those Labour Leave supporters who would see adherence to the European regulations as a compromise on Brexit's core principles. So the sentiment to rejoin the EU aligns with a broader trend where dissatisfaction with Lord Frost's clumsy Brexit outcome is growing. Lord Frost was a twit. And how do we know this? And how do we know? We know that he was the main negotiator, but we also know that he's a twit because he, as a life peer, thought that he could still renounce his peerage and stand in the House of Commons. He doesn't do the necessary research and work in order to take a decision. This is now clear. So it's not just Brexit that he messed up. It's also his own peerage and his own political future that he messed up, because he doesn't understand, because he doesn't read the paperwork, because he doesn't do the job. In other words, he is lazy or stupid. He may be both. Certainly possible. And I think there's many voters who feel that Brexit has introduced significant economic and political problems, and I think Labour would have a lot of support to re-establish closer ties with the EU. And of course, there's organisations and parties like Rejoin UK, and we'll talk about that, I hope, a group of people. We're going to do some videos and chats on Twitter, I think, over the next few weeks about Rejoin UK. But despite this support, Keir Starmer has ruled out rejoining the EU in the near term, and the party's current strategy is to try to make Brexit work and to improve Britain's relationship with the EU through practical measures like renegotiating existing deals for trade and cooperation. It's seen as a way to address immediate issues rather than reopening the divisions that dominated the last Parliament. And I think a Labour government should be putting its cards on its table and should say that there must be a future reconsideration of membership with Europe. And this could involve incremental steps like closer regulatory alignment, easing movement restrictions, which might eventually lead to broader discussions about rejoining the EU or having a relationship like the relationship between Turkey and the EU or Norway and the EU. Labour's new plan emphasises the UK's relationship with the continent, particularly in terms of defence, security cooperation. But those are things which we should have with our neighbours in any case. And the particularly the government of Liz Truss, though short, was hostile to Europe. And the need is to have greater cooperation, particularly in the light of a possible Trump administration, which might reduce, for example, American support for Ukraine, in contrast to the European support for Ukraine and our support for Ukraine. So the relationship with Europe, particularly with respect to the Ministry of Defence, is absolutely vital. Establishing a fully functioning military strategic headquarters, appointing a national armaments director to oversee our defence, our procurement, and our relationship with our closest neighbours. European officials believe that greater union with the UK will be challenging post-Brexit because of the complexities introduced by the Johnson, Truss, and Sunak governments. But the Brexit process, which has been legal, political, and economic, and has erected barriers that make closer integration difficult, is nevertheless simply a political and economic process. And even if we have concerns about realigning regulations, reworking standards, redeveloping policies between the UK and the EU, and even though these must operate within difficult and different frameworks, I think it's not impossible to see this as a challenge and something that could be addressed in the context of a first term for a new Labour government that is flag waving a much better relationship with Europe than the one that we have so far enjoyed in the years following the extraordinarily chaotic Brexit that we engineered and that Mrs. May and Boris facilitated.